Answers first. Questions over answers, and then we'll do how do you do this. SGT. Number who? The fraction was 41 2/3%. That's what you're asking, Zachary? 14? 96 inches cubed. Lincoln? Did it ask you for the median? 98.6. I was only going by whoever gave me the answer. 98.5 was the mean, the median was 98.6. So, questions over answers first. Tiana? 15? 7. Liv? 19 was 2. How many feel pretty good about tomorrow's test? That's what I like to see, confidence. Did anybody get them all right? Did anybody get less than 10 wrong?
Wait.
So, what was your question? Let's go, let's do this. Let's start at the beginning and go to the end. Wait a minute, reverse that. That. Sometimes the attitude. Again, children, I would think if you could get down this whole equation thing, that's 60% of the problems in this math, and I don't understand why this confuses everybody so much. They are all done the same way, the same algorithm, the same pattern, every problem, whether it's fractions, numbers, or whatever here. First thing I'd have to do here is what? So, subtract 3/4, and you did? And when you subtract 3/4, it is 6/8, right? 9 minus 6 is 3/8, right? And now I have this, and again, I have said this at least a bazillion times. I think we even talked about it yesterday. If you end up with a fraction in front of the letter, how do we solve it from there? Lauren? That's not what I usually say. Yes, that's what you do, but I simply say flip and multiply. It's just flipping this over and multiplying it. Because that makes this cross off. I mean, that is what division of fractions is. But let's skip the whole thing, and then 8's crossed off, and you're left with just the 3/7. Was that my answer? How many problems dealt with? How many problems dealt with equations? Good, that's it. One question's it. Emma Miller.
How do you do number 13?
Is that here or there? Or look at that. I love the jumbo board. Write 5/12 as a percent and as a decimal. Well, ladies and gentlemen, probably the easiest way is I would change. If I were doing this, I would go decimal first. This is wrong with every class so far. All right. How am I going to change it to a decimal fish? Yeah, you're just going to make it a division problem. Throw a couple of digits out there. That's what I put in my notes. Divide the bottom into the top. 12 doesn't go into 5, but 12 goes into 54 times. That's 48. Now you got to keep going until either it works out or you start getting something to repeat. So that's our goal here. 12 goes into 21 times. 12 goes into 80 6 times, which is 72. Oh, when I keep getting 8s, hopefully you realize that. You'll keep getting down here, but you'll keep getting 6s up there. Now, here's where you may struggle, ladies and gentlemen. See if you can make this connection. Okay? As a repeater, this is going to be 0.4 repeating 6. Right? 0.1 is repeating 6, sorry. So there's my decimal. What is that as a percent? Well, to change a decimal to a percent, you move the decimal over 2 places, so you have 41 as your whole number. Okay? But generally we don't mix repeating decimals with percentages, so I have to change what, look at that. What is 0.6 as a repeater as a fraction? If you look at your thing, 6 repeater is what fraction? It's 2/3. And that's where the 2/3% comes from. When you move this over, you're left with 0.41 repeater 6, and repeater 6 is a 2/3 as a fraction. If this would have been a repeater 3, you'd have put 1/3 there. If it would have been a repeater 4, what would it have been? Repeater 4 is what fraction? You've got the list there. 4/9. So those are your two answers there. Autumn.
How do you do number 1?
El número el cuatro. My Spanish is not real good. The $120 repair bill included $36 for parts and the rest for labor. I suppose you'd have to understand that, you not owning a car. You know, when you go to the service place, they charge you for the parts that it costs to fix your car and how long it takes them to fix your car, which would be this. Parts plus labor equals total. Here's my percent. I don't know any of these, except my total percent would be 100% of the bill. I do know $120 was the total bill, right? $120 repeater. $36 was for parts. And you can figure out how much labor was, because labor is what? $84?
Yeah.
Which, by the way, that's not much labor. If I could get onto the car place for $120, I'd take it in a heartbeat every time. What's the question? Somebody need to tell me.
What percent of the bill was labor?
So I want the labor. I want this number right here, which means I just make these two equal proportions slash ratios slash fractions. What number over 100 is 84 over 120? Is there an easy way to do this?
Yeah.
Somebody said yeah.
Yes.
I don't care. What would I reduce 84 over 120? You want to do that? You want to do somebody help me here? I'm looking for a little 8th grade help or 7th grade help here. What?
42 over 70.
Alright, well, divide them both in half, 42 over 60. Cut them in half again, I get 21 over 30. What number goes in 21 and 30? Let's just say 3. 3, divide them both by 3, you get 7 over 10. Oh, look, I can do that now. 10 times what is 100? 10. So 7 times 10 is 70. Is that the answer? 30% labor, or 30% parts, 70% labor. If you don't like to do it that way, you can always take this times this. 120 times n equals 84 times 100 and divide it all out. But you'll still get 70 at some point. Young Joseph, sir.
How do you do number 3?
Number 33.
Number 3.
A vertical yardstick cast a shadow. Joseph, did you draw the pictures?
Yes.
All right, good. So it looks like this. A vertical yardstick. Vertical. Here's my yardstick. It is 24 inches tall. Cast a shadow 16 feet. How does a 2-foot tall thing cast a 16-foot shadow? Now, here is where, ladies and gentlemen, the flagpole.
That's a shadow of 24 inches.
Jordan, Joseph, let that be a valuable lesson. You should really read the question before we start. All right, so it's a yardstick, Joseph, right? That's
Yes.
24 inches?
Yeah.
So how tall is my yardstick, Joseph? Remember, it's got to be in inches because this is in inches. So how many inches is a yard? A yard's 3 feet. 3 feet is 36 inches. So my 36-inch tall stick casts a 24-inch shadow. A flagpole casts a 16-foot shadow. So there, you just need to figure out what this is. And I believe that was, did you do a little proportion box?
Yes.
We are comparing the yardstick to the flagpole.
Yes.
And we've got the height of the yardstick And we can compare that to the shadow. And you filled in those blanks and this did not work. You had to get this right, otherwise it would be. The height of the yardstick was 36 inches. We don't know what the flagpole is. The shadow of this is 24 inches. We do know this is 16 feet. And again, you can leave these, as long as these are all right, you can leave this in feet. You don't have to change that in inches. It will still work. So there's your, we don't need this part. So here's your equal ratio / fraction. And luckily for you, this one, divided both by 12, it's 3/2. And how do you go to 2 to 16 is times 8. So 3 times 8 is 24. 24 feet tall. Did you get that right? After all that? Does that help? Do you want me to do that again? Did I confuse anybody on that? You do have to know that a yard is 36 inches tall. I can't change that little fact, but you can write your notes. I suppose if you didn't know, you could ask. M. Sittler.
How do you do number 12?
Number 12. Oh, do I need to know more? I can't just look at 12, can I? What? Oh, I can't just look at 11 either, can I? It's this guy right here?
Yeah.
I'm going to redraw that so I can actually see it a little better. I'll maybe put it over here. So you've got this shape, which is a parallelogram. And they cut the parallelogram into a triangle. Is that 10, 8, and 7?
Yeah.
And I know that, what is this? Angle B, I guess I need to say this. A, B, C, D. Angle B is 61 degrees. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but this would be a good, and I think this came up in 6th grade the other day. If you have a parallelogram, children, what do we know about the angles of a parallelogram? Opposite angles are equal. Did we talk about this? Did we use complementary, supplementary? Did we use those?
Yeah.
Yeah, we already did this. So angle D is also 61 degrees. But they didn't ask you that. They said DAB, this angle right here. Adjacent, do we use the word adjacent? This all seems vaguely familiar to me, yes? Adjacent angles are supplementary, which means they must equal 180 degrees. So this 61 plus that angle there has to equal 180 degrees, as does it added to that angle. And C and D have to be that. So what number when you add it to 100 or 61 is 180 degrees? 180 minus 61, 119 degrees. DAB, they will form a straight line if you put them together. Do you want me to do number 11 and 10 while I'm on this or no?
Yes.
10 I don't understand how in the world you could even get 10 wrong. I am perplexed on that. Simply because the area of a parallelogram is, area of a parallelogram is base times height. And what do you know about base and the height? We go through this every year. These two have to be right angles. And there's only one square little picture up there. Where is it? Right here. The two things that form that square are my base and my height. Area equals 7, which is actually the height, I guess, times 10, which is actually the base. 70, whatever that is, inches squared. And believe it or not, triangle ABC, the formula for the triangle is half of base times height. And we already did that there. Base is 7, height is 10. Reverse that. And that's where 35 comes from. If you miss that on tomorrow's test, you should hang your head in shame. I don't know, how could that be any easier? Note to self, look at the square, multiply the two things that make the square for one. On
You do number 6.
number 6. Love it, number 6. Number 6, now see, I will grant it to you children, if you got number 6 wrong, I can see that. There are problems on here that I would say should give you a little bit of issue. But obviously, Zach, you drew this thing, right? Rectangle? And it was what? The diagonal is 24 inches long? Well, that's unusual. This is 24 inches? No.
No.
What is the length of the diagonal? Sorry. Sorry. You will, this is 10 inches and this is 24 inches. Yep. Say yes.
Yes.
So obviously, anytime you're looking for the diagonal of a right triangle, which this is, you should think what?
36.
No. You should think Pythagorean theorem, right? We've done Pythagorean theorem, this thing up here. So hopefully, you're hoping that this is one of those triples that work out nicely. So you look for 10 and 24. Oh no. 7 and 24. Maybe we should just go with that. No, what should you do, Aaron Murray? No, you don't have to actually do the Pythagorean theorem, because before you do that, if the next thing fails, yes, you do that. Before you do that, you want to look to see if this is a dilated triangle of a smaller Pythagorean triple. So you look at these numbers and say, do they have a common factor, or can I divide them by the same thing? I can cut both of those in half. If I do that, this becomes 5, and this becomes 12. And then you hope, is a 5 12 up there in the triple?
Yes.
And what is it, a 5 12?
13.
13. But 13 is not your answer, because that's the diagonal of this little teeny triangle. You then need to blow it back up again. If you cut it in half to get to this, to go back to that, you have to double it to get back to where you started with. And that's where 26 comes from. Or you could do the Pythagorean theorem, actually, which would give you that, but it would be 100 plus what? 24 times 24? 4, 5, 6, 5 something. I don't know. But that's what I would do there. M. Miller.
I'm confused on how to do number 8.
Here for your confusion. Write the equation of this line in slope-intercept form. If you're jotting down notes, I would probably tell you to do this. First of all, slope-intercept form, the generic form is y equals what?
X plus B.
No, x plus b. And you are looking for the m, which is the slope of the line, and the b, which is where it crosses the y-axis. Let's get the b first. Here's my y-axis. Where does that cross the y-axis? What is that? That is where y is, here's 0. This is the origin, so that's -1. Righto? So my b is -1. Now I just need to figure out what the slope of that line is, and to find the slope of that line, here, let's blow it up a little bit. You need to make some sort of a right triangle out of that line. So you start here and find another place where it crosses both of them, and you make a triangle, a right triangle. And what do I do with that right triangle, you ask? Slope is always rise over run, or how far up over. The dimensions of my triangle are, it is 1 up over, how wide is it? 2. And then the last thing you have to say, is my line going uphill or downhill? It's going uphill, so it's a positive slope, so I can just keep it as 1/2. So there's my slope. Uh-oh, I lost So my slope is 1/2. So that goes right here. So there is your equation. Y equals, this is the slope, x minus 1 in slope-intercept form. Don't know what you need to take notes for that, but that's just the way it is. Adam Sittler.
How do you do number 4?
Number 4. There's this wrong one.
You have to slide over.
I do have to.
Down.
Remember, you can't see the forest through the trees, that's what this is. Oh boy, the sales tax rate is 7.5%. What is the sales tax on this? So, tax and tip are always, put it 1,000 times, Cassie, tax and tip is always multiplication. So you have to take 7.5% and multiply it by $164. The only problem is, how do I do that? Because I have to change it into a decimal to do that. 7.5%, this is that same thing I just talked about at the beginning of this whole thing. We know that 7% is 0.07, but what is 0.5%? And don't just stick a 2 there, because that's not it. You have to think about what is 1/2 as a decimal. It's 0.5, so that's what the digit that gets stuck on there. This is 5/10 of the next percent. If that's a half, cool. If this was a fourth, if it was 7 1/4%, what decimal would it be? 0.0725. Because 1/4 as a decimal is 0.25. If it was 7 1/8%, what is that as a decimal? Well, it's 0.07 for that. What is the decimal equivalent of 1/8? 125. This is what you have to use for the decimal for that. The fraction 1/8 is this part of it. The 7 comes from that. Hey, we got milk, kids. So, back to this. Do I need to do that multiplication? Yes or no? Did somebody say yes? Just know there's a lot of decimal places there. And you don't really need to do this part of it. You could just do 0.075 times 164. You don't need those decimals because they don't count over there. 5 times 4 is 20, 28, 30. This is a goofy way to do it. Why did I do it this way? 33, 42, 45. I don't know where I'm at. 46? Somebody stop me before I go too crazy. Yeah, that's not right. 33, 42, 45, 0, 0, 7, 5, 0, 0, 3. How many I got that right? $12.30. No?
Yes.
$12.30. That's how much tax. If they ask you how much you had to pay, you'd have to add that to the $164 and get what, $172.30, whatever it is. All those numbers are sweet. Well, that's it. Love it. I would have thought for sure somebody would ask me about the negative exponents and fractions. Based on all the trouble yesterday we had with this, I'm just going to do it. People understand this. How do you change a fraction that has a negative exponent into its usable form, Zachary? You flip it. And when you flip this, you get 2/3 to the first power. And the nice thing is 2/3 to the first power is 2/3. Anything to the first power is itself. So now you have 3/2 minus 2/3. Just change to common denominators. Times 2 times 3. And 9/6 minus 4/6 is 5. Must be getting humid out. Anytime it gets warm, see that? And then I know somebody wants me to do this, right, Leighton? If you do scientific notation, and I see some of you still on quizzes are doing, change them into decimals. No, don't do that, people. This is way too easy. You multiply the two numbers on the left together, you get 12 times 10. What do you do to exponents when you multiply? You add the exponents together. What is a -4 plus a -3? -7. and put that down and you have it wrong. Why? Because it's no longer in scientific notation. How do I make it scientific notation? I need to make the decimal between 1 and 10, so it starts here, I have to put it there, it becomes 1.2. Here's where people seem to make their mistake. Your choice is either, your answer is either going to be -6 or -8, because you have to move it one place because you moved the decimal one place. Which one will it be, Andrew? Why? Because you have to think about this being a balance. You made this number 1 smaller, you have to make this exponent 1 bigger. And -6 plus, -7 plus 1 is -6. All of this will be available for your re-reviewing tonight on justconfusing.com. Because I am just confused. Autumn.
Number 19.
Number 19. I'm on some sort of a roll. And again, another equation. They're all done the same way. This one's a little different. Why? Because the book tries to fool you by putting the x term there, but it doesn't matter. What's the first thing I get rid of, Autumn? Nope. First thing I get rid of is the thing that doesn't have the x. How do I get rid of this 0.8? I subtract it. Minus 0.8, it goes away. Minus 0.8, lining up the decimals, I get 0.4. By the way, if you don't like to work with decimals, you could change them all into fractions and do it all fraction-wise if you want, but I don't know about that. Now, I have 0.2x equals 0.4. Pretty much the last thing you always do with equations is to divide. To get rid, because this is multiplication, you have to divide by 0.2. 0.4 divided by 0.2. And ladies and gentlemen, this is where I would look at that bubble. This is terrible. Make sure you understand it's 0.4 being divided by 0.2. It's 0.4 underneath the thing being divided by 0.2. Move the decimal, it's 4 divided by 2. Your answer is just A2. X equals 2. Did I do something wrong? No. You had that little grin like I did it. You're enjoying watching me. Yes, Grace?
How would you do number 9?
Number 9. Is that on this page?
It's the very last.
A coin is tossed and a number cubed is rolled. What's the probability of getting a head and an even number? So you got your coin. It's tossed and a number cubed is rolled. And you're looking for this, the probability of getting a head and an even number. When you have two different things happening, how do you find the probabilities of both of them happening? You, Chase. You don't know, do you? The odds of this happening, the probability of this happening is the probability of each one happening multiplied together. What is your probability of flipping a head? Yeah, 1 out of 2. Here's where maybe you went wrong. What's the probability of getting an even number? Well, on a cube, you can either get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. How many even numbers are there?
3.
Out of how many total possibilities?
6.
6. So it's 1/2 times 3, 6, which is the same as 1/2 times 1/2, so which is 0. 3 over 12, which reduces to 1/4. You could have changed that to a half and still get 1/4. Have we never done that before? Was that something? So,
How do I do number 16?
are we getting close to the end? No. 16. How do we do number 16, ladies and gentlemen? Who got it right? See, there's like 8 different ways I could tell you, but I don't know what the easiest way is. So Lauren, what's the first thing you did?
I put the x negative square on the bottom.
Okay, so Lauren says let's make our negative exponents positive. So this goes to the bottom and becomes x to the positive 2. So it's no longer up here. Then Lauren?
I put the x squared negative on the bottom.
Alright, so these two x squareds, when you multiply, you add them together, so it's x to the 4th on the bottom. You still have the y, you still have the 2. On top, you've got the 6, x to the 5th, and you can put those two y's together to get y squared. Now what? Lauren?
You got rid of the x fourth on the bottom. And
Alright.
then you were left with one x on top.
Right. This is like having 4 x's times themselves, and this is 5 of them. So 4 of them cross off with 4 of them, and you're left with just 1 x on top. That's my x's. How about with my y's? On top I have a y squared, and I have 1y. So this one will cross off with one of the 2 up there to leave me with just 1y. Well, that's left. And then 2 goes into 6 3 times. Was there anything left on the bottom? I don't think so. Everything on the bottom goes away. It really technically is a 1, but we don't have to put a 1 because a 1 on the bottom of anything just makes it itself. So if the 1 was on top, you'd have to leave it. You can't take that one away. But the bottom one, too. How about that top one? Because I know somebody got that wrong. Can we just do it for fun? Yeah, let's do it. This top one here. Anything to the, or I guess order of operations, exponents first. Anything to the 0 power is 1. 3 to the 1st power is, anything to the 1st power is itself. 2 to the 2nd power, 2 times 2 is 4. And 1 to the 3rd power, 1 times 1 times 1 is still 1. And then order of operations, say you have to work from left to right, addition, subtraction. 1 plus 3 is 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. 8 minus 1 is 7. Madison.
Number 16, is it okay if we put 3yx?
Yep. Ugh. Ugh. Who said like this? Hey, it's opening day.
Oh yeah.
Cubs are where, Texas?
Yeah.
Does anybody care about the Sox?
No.
Autumn.
Number 14.
Number 14, children. 14. Ladies and gentlemen, number 14. Number 14. What is the volume? Autumn, you don't happen to have the formula for volume written down on your paper, do you? Because I, again, cannot think of anything that would really be too much easier. Volume of a prism is just length times width times height. So guess what I'm going to multiply together? 8 times 4 times 3. In any order you want. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 8 is 96. Is that the last one? The band got to go? Grab yourself a pencil. Feel free, kids. I'll post this up there if you want to. I might watch it myself tonight when I'm bored. Just to see. Flossie, did you ever watch one? Liv?
How did you say?
Who?
7.
How many can we have left, children? How many?
Oh.
3 is all that's left?
Well,
That's encouraging.
5.
Remember when I went back to that whole equation thing, same thing, an inequality is an equation. How do I get x by itself, Joseph?
You
I want x by itself, Joseph.
subtract the 2.
I just subtract the 2. Think about this as being like an equal sign. So x has to be less than 1. And then as a graph, this is no equal sign, so it's an open circle at 1. And it has to be less than, and here is your little helpful device here. The arrow has this point on it. So it goes this way. Again, I don't consider that to be incredibly difficult in any stretch of the imagination. Missed it. Missed it. Anticlimactic at best. So,
How do I do 2?
we did 2, didn't we?
Yeah.
Oh,
Just checking. Students measure the mass of the rock, the readings were, so did you order them from least to greatest?
Yeah.
And you still didn't get the right answer for which one?
For the mode.
The who?
Mode.
It didn't ask you for the mode.
No, it just asked for me.
It asked you for the middle number and the average. Do I still need to do that, or do you need to? Huh? So you basically want me to add it up and divide.
Oh.
Mode is the one that appears the most, in which case it doesn't have a mode, it's none of them. They just ask you for the average and the middle number. Those are the 2 things they wanted, but you have to leave the order from least to greatest. I don't know if I have that kind of time.
Are you doing number 5?
We haven't done that one?
It's the last one. That's the last one.
No, I don't want it to be over, it's been so much fun. The speedometer on Murray's car shows that the speed in both miles per hour and kilometers per hour, using 1.6 as the equivalent for 1 mile. So that's what I'd write down. You know that 1.6 kilometers equals 1 mile. That's my unit multiplier I'm going to use. Find the mile per hour rate that is equivalent to, I'm given 80 kilometers per hour. That's what I'm given. And I want to change that into miles per hour. Find the mile per hour. So, I need kilometers to cross off, so where does it have to be? On the bottom. And I'm changing it into miles, so that goes on top. 1.6 is down here. 1 is up there. Kilometers cross off, and your answer will be, it's in miles per hour now, I just need to take 80 divided by 1.6, which is 800 divided by 16. 5, 0. 50 mile an hour. So that's the last one?
Yeah.
I don't want it to end. I like to look at it at the